From the old movies of 30 years ago and beyond,
to the world of the new films of the last 30 years.
To the movies that are now playing, this is Old, New, and Now Playing. And now, here's your host, Will Robinson Smith.
Hello and welcome to Old, New, and Now Playing, your time machine through the world of movies, and welcome to my new set. It's still a bit of a work in progress, but I like how things are moving along so far, but things are going to continue to change in the coming weeks, so just bear with me as the set evolves. And speaking of evolving and changing, there are going to be some changes to the show, which I'll go into a bit more in a later video, but for now, we're talking about Tom Hanks, and he's taking to the skies in his latest film, Sully, so I thought, hey, let's talk about another great performance of his, so grab your overcoat and Tommy gun, this is your feature presentation. Road to Perdition was released in 2002 and features a star-studded cast headlined by Tom Hanks. This was also the second time in the director's chair for Sam Mendes. He came out swinging 3 years before with American Beauty, which landed 8 Academy Award nominations and 5 wins, including Best Picture and Best Director. And while Road to Perdition didn't get quite the same level of Oscar love in 2003, the film still netted 6 nominations and a win for Best Cinematography. The future Skyfall Inspector director definitely took some cues from the if it ain't broke style of filmmaking, bringing over his casting director, composer, and cinematographer, among others, from American Beauty. By the way, this was the last major motion picture for cinematographer Conrad L. Hall before he died in 2003. He won his first Oscar for cinematography for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid back in 1970 and worked on other great films like Cool Hand Luke. While talking about this movie, he said he really admires Sam Mendes as a filmmaker.
Anytime Sam Mendes wants me to shoot a film for him, I'll be there.
But we'll talk more about the cinematography a bit later. So the movie takes place in 1931 in the small town of Rock Island, Illinois, which sits near the Iowa state line. Tom Hanks plays Michael Sullivan, a poor man who tries to provide for his family by working as an enforcer for the Irish mob. He was taken under the wing of John Rooney, played by Paul Newman, who acts like Sullivan's father. However, Rooney already has a son, Connor, played by pre-James Bond Daniel Craig. The fact that he's pretty much getting the shaft while Sullivan becomes the favorite child doesn't really sit well with him. Meanwhile, Sullivan has 2 boys of his own, Michael Jr. and Peter. Sullivan works hard to try and shelter them from his work, until Michael Jr. gets a bit too interested. He sees his father and Connor take out some other men, and suddenly, Sullivan and his son are on thin ice with the mob. Connor sees a window to get back in his father's good graces, and I won't spoil exactly what he does, but he does something which forces Sullivan out of the inner circle and paints him as a problem that has to be dealt with. That forces Newman's John Rooney to hire a hitman, played by Jude Law, to take out Sullivan.
God help me.
One of the best things about this movie is the concept. The film was based on the 1998 graphic novel of the same name by Max Allan Collins, which was loosely based on the 1970 manga Lone Wolf and Cub. The movie weaves together several interpretations of the father-son dynamic and makes you think about what makes a good father. Is it the shielding of a child's innocence? Protecting them at all costs? Mendes does a good job of setting up these characters and their relationships without weighing down moments with too much dialogue, like this scene where we get a perfect picture of the Connor-Michael-John relationship.
Why are you always smiling?
Because it's all so fucking hysterical.
Per usual with these reviews, I hadn't actually seen the film before sitting down to watch it for this review, and I really liked the way they handled the family dynamics, and I think part of what made that really work was the fact that this film is stacked with talent. This is a solid dramatic role by Tom Hanks. He was coming off of a hot streak in the late 90s and early 2000s, with his last 3 films being Castaway, Toy Story 2, and The Green Mile. Here, he embodies a man torn between protecting his son Michael Jr. and seeking revenge on the mob for wronging him. Hanks does a good job of trying to do right by everyone, but ultimately knows that his son has to come first. And speaking of his son, Michael Jr. is played by Tyler Hoechlin. Fans of his will recognize him from his work on the TV series Teen Wolf. He will also be heading back to the small screen as the Man of Steel on the CW series Supergirl later this year. And while I don't have too much experience with him in his TV roles, I thought he did really well, especially acting alongside talent like Tom Hanks and Paul Newman. The movie opens up with a monologue by him, which essentially sets up the film to be a flashback of his life, and the movie doesn't exactly follow that idea throughout the entire film, but when it does, it's a really effective method of storytelling. A great example is when Michael Jr. witnesses his father and Connor take out several men. the moment is captured entirely from Michael Jr.'s perspective. Also worth discussing is Paul Newman's performance. His character isn't on screen for a lot of the movie, but when he is, he owns the space even when he's not the one driving the action. This film also gave him his 10th and final Academy Award nomination.
Let's wake him to God and hope that he gets to heaven at least an hour before the devil finds out he's dead.
Really, everyone is strong in this movie, whether you're talking about Daniel Craig, who's the jealous mob boss's son, or Stanley Tucci, who plays the underboss to Al Capone, or even Jennifer Jason Leigh, who plays Tom Hanks' wife. But I think the person we still really need to talk about specifically is the character played by Jude Law. Like I mentioned before, he plays the hitman who is sent after Michael Sullivan and his son. I don't want to talk about him too much because I want to stay away from spoilers, but I thought he was a really fun foil for Sullivan. The film doesn't give you too much about his backstory, but just enough to make him curious to watch. There's a slimy charm to him that Jude Law pulls off really nicely. And really, when you're talking about all of the elements coming together, hats off to Conrad L. Hall for some great cinematography. The choices that were made by he and director Sam Mendes really worked well here. I finally saw Butch Cassidy last year after my friend Gene recommended it so highly, and the man is a master at what he does. Between looking great and having another excellent Thomas Newman score, I thought this film really executed on a lot of levels. The thing that still irks me, though, is part of the overall structure of the film.
There are many stories about Michael Sullivan.
As I mentioned before, the film starts with a monologue by Michael Jr. setting it to be a flashback film. Which is fine, but there are a number of scenes in which the film breaks away to a perspective completely unavailable to Michael Jr., so there's no way he would have known certain details. And that's not to say that those were bad scenes or detracted from the pace or flow of the film, but it just bothered me a bit that they started telling the film one way and then seemingly abandoned that method from time to time. Overall, though, this is a solid film. The cast is great, it's a beautiful looking movie, and just when you kind of think you know where it's going, it'll take a left turn. I give Road to Perdition an 8 out of 10. If you're in the mood for a bit of a darker film with some great acting, I certainly recommend this movie. Plus, I found it at Barnes & Noble in their $4.99 section on DVD, so if you want to own it for pretty cheap, that's one way to do it. And those are my thoughts on Road to Perdition. When you've had a chance to see the movie, I'd love to hear all your thoughts about it, and what's one of your favorite mob-themed movies, and not the Godfather trilogy. I'm taking that one just off the table, so come up with something else. Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. I want to hear all about that. And guys, that will do it for this episode of Old, New, and Now playing in our brand new set. If you like this review, please give it a thumbs up. That'd be great. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that old subscribe button down below. That would be wonderful if you want to keep up with everything going on with this channel, all of the changes and movie reviews we have coming down the pipe for you. And that will do it for today. I am once again Will Robinson Smith. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.